Hello and welcome to MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic. In this video, we are going to update and upgrade our Feather the Redeemed EDH deck. Greetings and salutations to the MTGBC. You are the MTG Burgeoning community. Welcome back to another installment of the Up and Up series. Here we are going to update and upgrade Feather the Redeemed as it inches closer and closer to its imminent entrance into the Burgeoning Commander Catalog. We have a handful of cards that are going in, which means there are a handful of cards that are coming out. We're going to start with a land swap. Going in is Sundown Pass. Yes, finally, a Boros slow land has reached Feather's grasp. This will come into play tapped unless we control two or more other lands. It taps for a red or it taps for a white, which is going to make Feather very, very happy because, of course, those are her two colors. With one land going in, one land is going to come out, and that's going to be Temple of the False God. It is much more important in this deck to make sure that we have the colored mana to cast Feather and the colored mana to cast our instant and sorcery spells with which Feather synergizes so well. So Temple's coming out because it only taps to add 2 colorless mana, and that ability we can only activate if we control 5 or more lands. So we're sacrificing a tiny bit of potential mana ramp for some color fixing, and in this deck, that's going to be much more important. Alright, so we're going to leave the realm of land base and go into some resource development, and the card going in that's going to help us enhance that feature is Smuggler's Share. We were able to secure a copy of this just for Feather. This is an enchantment that costs 2 and a white, and at the beginning of each end step, I'm going to stress that it's not just our end step, it's at the beginning of each end step. We will draw a card for each opponent who drew 2 or more cards this turn, and we will create a treasure token for each opponent who had at least 2 lands or more enter their battlefield under their control. So we're going to get card advantage because our opponents are going to want to draw, and we're going to get some mana acceleration because our opponents are going to want to ramp that mana. Smuggler's Share is going to make sure that we get the best of both worlds potentially at the beginning of every single end step. With Smuggler's Share going in, coming out is going to be Primal Amulet. This is an artifact that has a CMC of 4, so it is a little on the pricey side for what it does before it transforms. This gives instant and sorcery spells we cast 1 generic mana less to cast. So before we get on to the other block of text and when this artifact eventually transforms into the land, let's stop right here and look at this card for what it does for the synergy of this Feather deck. For 4 generic mana, we're going to have instant and sorcery spells cost 1 less to cast, as the bulk of the spells that we utilize to synergize with Feather become more and more prioritized to 1 or 2 CMCs, reducing our instant and sorcery spells by 1 for a mana value of 4. That is not getting the greatest return on our mana investing buck. So for the purposes of what we're trying to do here with Feather, this becomes much clunkier when we consider how much more effective providing additional resources are to what Smuggler's Share can do. Yes, Primal Amulet does give us some form of tempo and mana ramping by reducing the cost of those spells, but like I said, with so many of those spells having CMCs of just 1 or maybe 2, we're not getting as much as we could. And even if we were able to transform this artifact, which we do when we get 4 or more charge counters on this, and we put charge counters onto this artifact whenever we cast an instant or sorcery spell. If we were to transform this artifact into the land, it's Primal Wellspring, which will tap to add 1 mana of any color, which will be red or white, of course, because those are the colors that we need. And then when that mana is spent to cast an instant or sorcery spell, we will copy that spell, and we may choose new targets for the copy. With the way that this deck is sculpted, although a copy here and a copy there will be beneficial, it's more the act of casting and targeting the spells at our own creatures, and that minimal copy effect, when coupled with the small CMC reduction, well, it's just not good enough. The Smuggler's Share is a lot better of a card for this deck than Primal Amulet, making its transition that much easier to accept. All right, now speaking about the bulk of spells that are built around Feather, here are 2 spells that are going in with mana values of 1, replacing 2 spells with mana values of 2, which are going to do a better job at what those spells did. So the spells going in, we have Lauren's Escape. 1 white mana, target artifact or creature gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn, and weaken Scry 1. Note the nice little addition to target artifact or creature. Generally, these spells only target the creatures that give them hexproof and indestructible. Here we can target one of our artifacts, and if you've been a fan of this Feather deck since its inception, you know we do have a number of artifact win conditions, primarily Aetherflux Reservoir. So Lauren's Escape is going in with a mana value of just 1, and it is going to replace Valorous Stance. Now here we have target creature gains indestructible until end of turn, which is 1 and a white mana. But if we slide this over to the left a little bit, Lauren's Escape gives target creature hexproof and indestructible for just 1 white mana, and we get the benefit of the peripheral Scry 1. Now, granted, this is a modal spell, so we could choose to destroy target creature with toughness 4 or greater, other than casting this to give target creature indestructible until end of turn. However, we have a very nice suite of removal spells already in the 99 of this build. So, for the purposes of protecting Feather, Valorous Stance was initially selected due to its ability to keep our general on the battlefield. Well, you have become obsolete because Lauren's Escape does it so much better and cheaper. The next card going in with a mana value of 1, it's Boon of Safety. Here we put a shield counter on target creature, and again, we get to scry 1. Now, a shield counter, if a creature with a shield counter would be dealt damage or would be destroyed, instead, we remove the shield counter from it instead. So if someone goes to target Feather with some targeted destruction removal, we can cast Boon of Safety, put a shield counter on Feather, and then when their spell resolves, we'll remove the shield counter, and we'll keep Feather safe and sound. We can do this at any time, or we can just cast this whenever she is going to be targeted. That shield counter doesn't get removed, it just stays there outside of some kind of remove counter from target permanent interaction from our opponents. So with Boon of Safety putting a shield counter onto Feather, it's going to replace Apostle's Blessing. This was an instant for 1 and 1 white Phyrexian mana. Now, Phyrexian mana can be paid either by its color or by 2 life. So technically, we could pay just 1 mana and 2 life to cast the spell, but why would we when we have a spell like when we have a spell like Boon of Safety that can do it for just 1 mana and no life? Target artifact or creature we control gains protection from artifacts or from the color of our choice until end of turn. This is a bit more limiting. We only get to pick if it's going to be artifacts or 1 color. So that's 1 of 6 different possibilities, where the shield counter that's put on by Boon of Safety does not discriminate. That card is better than this card, and it's cheaper. All right, the last swap for this video today, going in and synergizing beautifully with the Feather engine that we have constructed in this deck, is RC Sharpshooter. Yes, it is a transformer. It is a 2/2 legendary robot. We do want to cast this for its more than meets the eye cost, but we'll get to that in one moment. RC Sharpshooter has first strike. We can pay 1 generic mana and remove 1 or more +1/+1 counters from RC, and if we do, it deals that much damage to target creature, and then we convert RC. Now, this is not a +1/+1 counter deck, so we do need to find ways in which to get +1/+1 counters onto RC, which is why we want to cast it for its more than meets the eye cost. That's just a red and a white, versus RC Sharpshooter's cost of 1 red and a white. So when we cast it for a red and a white, it comes into play as RC Acrobatic Coupe, a 2/2 vehicle with the living metal mechanic. That means that it's as long as it's our turn, this vehicle is also a creature. So we do not have to crew RC during our turn in order to send it into combat. Then, after our turn is over, it's no longer a creature. So we have to keep that in mind because this helps to prevent her from being destroyed by any of our peripheral, any opponent's peripheral destroy all creature spells or destroy target creature spells. No. You're not going to do that with sorceries on your turn because RC is going to be an artifact vehicle. So this is how RC is going to synergize with our Feather Engine. Whenever we cast a spell that targets 1 or more creatures or vehicles we control, remember, that's all we want to do in this Feather deck. Cast spells that target our creatures. Whenever we do that with our C Acrobatic Coupe on our side of the battlefield, we put that many +1/+1 counters on RC. Then we convert RC, the +1/+1 counters stay, and now we have a way in which to deal direct damage to creatures on the battlefield, which will help to manage the battlefield from opposing threats from our opponents, and each time we get rid of one, we convert RC back, then we cast some more spells that target more of our creatures, we get more +1/+1 counters through this flipping back and forth dynamic that RC has in this Feather deck. She is considered a vital cog in what we can do from a battlefield management perspective, all through the peripheral benefits of engaging in the engine that we have sculpted in this Feather deck. They must have constructed RC with Feather in mind. I am absolutely convinced that that's what they did with Optimus Prime's squeeze. All right, so with RC Sharpshooter coming in and giving us a very powerful, potentially game-winning legendary robot here because of the flipping back and forth, the battlefield management, the +1/+1 counters. With her coming in, we need to take out another form of what we were trying to do with our spell casting engine. So with RC going in, Myth Realized is coming out. This is an enchantment that costs just 1 white mana, and whenever we cast a non-creature spell, we put a lore counter on this, or we can pay 2 and a white mana to put a lore counter on this. Then we can pay a white mana, and until end of turn, Myth Realized becomes a monk avatar creature in addition to its other types, and gains this creature's power and toughness are each equal to the number of lore counters on it. Here's the problem with Myth Realized. Even though the lore counters could be plentiful, there's no evasion whatsoever. So this can get chump blocked for days. It could be a 20/20 for all we know, but it gets blocked down by a 0/1 plant or a 1/1 creature token, and we can never really realize the benefits that this Myth enchantment can give us. And I think RC replacing Myth Realized is going to make this build so much stronger. And there you have it, MTG BC. We had a handful of updates for our Feather the Redeemed deck as we await its imminent arrival to the Burgeoning Commander Catalog. Let me know your thoughts about these changes in the comment section below. This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things Magic.